Hey, what's happening out there, everybody? Dave here again with what I hope is a interesting educational short video about creating forms with the values. A lot of you budding artists know about this 9 value. This happens to be a 10 value value step with ivory black is 0, titanium white as your lightest light. Some value steps are 10 steps, some are 9. As you can see, I'm sure some of you have already created this or are aware of it. If you haven't, it's a good exercise to do to actually mix these values to get an understanding. But quite often, books don't show you how to use them. I'm going to show you how to, you don't need all of them to create form. This ball right here is an example. If all the value steps are numbered, 0 being black, 2 being second step, and so on up to 10 being titanium white again. And this kind of shows if you took each value and painted, following the form, and it shows you the number of the value. Once you've created that and you blend them all together, you'd have a perfect three-dimensional sphere. Of course, that can be broken down even more and more, but it takes a while to paint something like that. In these steps right here on this sphere, you can see we have the highlight, the light or the local light. We have the midtones, which is a transitional tone between the light and the shadow. We have the core shadow. That's the darkest part of the particular object, and the shadow area. Here we have a reflected light, and since it's actually sitting on a ground plane, we have a cast shadow. Now, cast shadows, that's only if it's sitting on a ground plane, and sometimes you can have reflected light, sometimes you don't. But in this particular exercise, I'm going to show you how we can use 5 of these values. We're going to use the shadow, the core shadow, that's 2. We're going to use a mid-tone, which is 3. We're going to mix the light, which is 4, and we need a highlight, which is 5. Those are the 5 tones we're going to mix. We're going to use ivory black and titanium white. Since I'm going to be painting on a white canvas, I'm actually mixing my values on a little white palette here. That's always a good thing to do. Sometimes you can run into a lot of trouble if whatever tone you mix your values on is not the same as you're painting on. In this case, we're going to use some ivory black over here. Ivory black. And this titanium white might be a bit hard to see because naturally it's on a white canvas. And we've got titanium white. Now these are our 2 extremes. Our extreme light and our extreme dark. But this particular exercise, we're only going to use 5 values. So we've got our darkest dark, which is going to be our shadow core. And we've got titanium white, which is going to be our highlight. So we need to mix a mid-tone. So therefore, we're going to take some ivory black and some titanium white, and we're going to mix a mid-tone. Now this can be it's always subjective. Yours may not be as dark or as light as mine, but it's the actual value relationships that matters. Now I'm going to make this a little bit lighter. I think it's a little too dark. And even during the actual painting, you can always adjust your values. Nothing's really set in stone. I'm going to make this mid-tone somewhat lighter. Let's see how that looks. It's still a little bit dark, so. We'll see how it looks when I get the other values next to it. We'll make a mid-tone about right here. Now for space, I need to move my titanium white over some more. Need to move it over a little bit. Okay, the next, in between each mixture, I clean off my palette knife so I don't contaminate it. You can see the palette knife is clean. So now we got to mix this is our mid-tone, so now we're going to mix a shadow tone. Now this shadow tone won't be as dark as the black, and it won't be as light as the mid-tone. It has to be in between. So I'm going to, I can always take some of this, or I'll take a little bit of white since I got quite a bit of white there. On the sphere that we're going to paint, these are the 5 values that we're mixing up. It's always a good practice to pre-mix your values and your paints before you do any painting. Makes the painting go a lot smoother. We're going to darken this a little bit more. This is going to be the shadow on the sphere we're going to paint. Always clean off my palette knife before I go into back into the mix again, or to the primary pile. And I think I can make that a little darker. We'll just keep on. We'll make it a little bit darker. Okay, we got that one. And let's see here. Now we need, this is the shadow, the mid-tone, and we need the light. So we're going to take some of this white. And we're going to mix a little bit of, we got to darken it just a little bit. It's going to be lighter than the mid-tone, of course, not as light as the highlight. Wiping off my palette knife, and I'm going to lighten it up a little bit more. Now, like I said, your values may not look exactly like mine. That's no problem. But it's mainly you want the relationships between the values that you have mixed up. You want to see a nice transition and a difference between each value. So now we've got our, basically our 5 values. Maybe I'll lighten this light up a little bit more. Even when I'm painting, I can always adjust the values. Okay, we got our shadow core, our shadow, our mid-tone, our light, and our highlight. We got our 5 values. So now we're going to go over to the canvas, and we're going to actually paint a sphere. I'm going to draw a circle, and from there we're going to, as a shape, and transform it into a 3-dimensional object, a sphere. Hold on. Okay, now I'm back at the easel. This time I decided to use the same panel that I put the values on to make it a little more straightforward and simpler. This is what I'm going to paint the sphere on. I'm using 3 different brushes. These are our Scholastic Wonder White brand, number 8s, and they're bright. That's the term. They're number 8 brights. long handles. As you can see, the handles are quite long. One brush is going to be used for the mid-tone. One brush is going to be used for the shadow and the shadow core. And another brush is going to be used for the light and the highlight. Now, the ones that I use two values for, in between changing to the other value, I'll be wiping it off real good on my cloth. I keep a cloth to wipe my brushes off with. So we're going to start, and the first thing I'm going to do is use my mid-tone to draw a circle. And that's what we're going to do. Now, that is the shape. Right now, it's a circle. When we fill in the values and create the third dimension or form, that's when it becomes a form. When we put the values in. Right now, it's just a shape. The values make it a form when we put those in. So what I usually do is start with my shadow value. These over here. First thing you want to do is determine where your light's coming from. In this particular exercise, we're going to have the light coming from the upper left. And it's not coming exactly in a parallel way. I like to look at it as though it's coming from this upper left, but it's coming kind of like into the canvas like this. This is the way I see it. So that our highlight is going to be right here. So first thing we want to do is paint in our shadow. We want to follow, since if the light's coming from this direction, that means the shadow is opposite. So we're going to follow the shape, put in our shadow. We want to do it nice and opaque, which means not real watery or transparent, like watercolor or anything. Smooth it in. We want to follow the shape. And we want to paint a crescent. Nice crescent shape. Since I'm not observing anything in particular, I can decide how much I want my shadow. And I usually put it about like this. That's a good shadow. Now I'm putting that brush down, and I'm picking up my mid-tone brush. I go into my mid-tone value, and I put that in just as opaque, right alongside the shadow. Now, at any time, if I feel that one of these values is too dark or too light, I can always change it. It's the value relationships that you have, their relationship with each other, which gives the illusion of three-dimensional form. I want to paint another crescent. Now this time it won't be as wide or thick as the shadow. This is going to be the transition value between the shadow and the light. It's the mid-tone. Now I'm going to set this brush down. And the brush I haven't used yet, as you can see, this is my light value brush. The main thing is to see a difference in these values. And right now, you'll notice we're not blending in values. We're just actually putting them in side by side. It's like that ball I showed you earlier. No white paint, no white canvas visible in between the values. You got to make sure you don't have that canvas showing through. Now in this particular instance, I'll go around the outer side of this sphere with the light value. You'll notice I'm painting more or less in one direction. I may actually change direction, go one way or another, but I'm not doing like this. I'm not windshield wiper like. You just go in one direction, whichever direction that is, use that direction. And if I change direction, all depends on which way what part of the form I'm trying to paint. Now, if you notice, I'm following the form, the shape of this particular round object, this ball. Now, at this point, I'm leaving an opening for the highlight. Because we're on a white canvas, it's going to mix in somewhat with this light, or you wouldn't be able to see it. So right now I'm wiping my brush off. Wiping my brush off on my cloth. I'm going into the actual white paint. This is my highlight. I expect some of that to blend in a little bit eventually with my local light. So I'm filling in the canvas. Now, wipe my brush off. Now I'll go back to my shadow brush. This is my shadow tone. I got a little bit of paint on it. I'm going to wipe it off. I don't want a lot of paint on this brush for the blending portion. Now I will blend the shadow into the mid-tone. Blending is just something you got to practice. Different amounts of pressure at different times. Remember, we're blending the shadow into the mid-tone. Sometimes, rather than try to move paint too much, I just wipe my brush off and go back into it again. You can always blend as long as you want, as long as you stay within that small parameter. If you go too far, in this case, into one direction or the other, too far into the shadow or too far into the mid-tone, you start getting the values kind of dirty, and it messes up the illusion. So we're going to leave it like that for the moment. This is my shadow. Now, I'll take my mid-tone brush. I'm wiping it off a little bit, any excess paint. I'm going to blend the mid-tone into the light. As I say, blending is an art unto itself. You got to really take your time and develop your patience and different sensitivity to pressure. Now, what helps, that's another brush that I use for blending. And we will see that I've got two of these. These are filberts, still Scholastic Wonder White, but it's the number 12. As you can see, they're nice and soft and real flexible. I'm going to use one for the dark tones and another for my light tones. First one is for my dark tones, blending the shadow into the halftone. Real light touch. Now I will take the other filbert and blend from the mid-tone into the light. These are a little softer than the number 8 brights, and therefore they're better for blending. Okay, now I'll take my brush that I use for the light, wipe it off real good. I'm going to blend this highlight in. Following the form first. As you can see, it begins to develop its own three-dimensional look. Now I may go across this a little bit, smooth it out. Still trying to blend some of it into the actual light. I'm still trying to more or less follow the form of the sphere as I blend. And the thing about these oils, once they dry, you can go back over it and accentuate your highlight, and you can accentuate mainly your shadows or your shadow core, which I'm going to put in right now. Sometimes I'll wait till it dries, then put in the shadow core. But right now, for the sake of this exercise, I'm going to put in the shadow core while it's still wet. Once it's dry, I'll be able to take just regular titanium white and hit right in here, which I may go back into another day or two once this is dry, and show you how it brings out. It really brings that sparkle out in it. So right now, I'm going to put this brush down, and I'm taking up my shadow brush, wiping it off real good, and I'm going into the actual straight straight ivory black, excuse me. Not getting a lot on because it's very powerful. Now, the shadow core, I like to put it in not at the line where the shadow goes into the midtone, but just back a little bit from that merging of those two values. I put it in about right here. And follow the form. This goes in a lot better when it's dry. A lot better. As you see, I gradually increase my amount of paint once I get the actual form of it correct. Now, once I decide I've got enough, I have to blend it in. Don't want any sharp edges. This is the shadow core. Sometimes it's called a terminator. This really describes the shape of any form, especially cylindrical or spherical forms. I'm wiping off my brush repeatedly when you don't see it on the canvas. I don't want to get too much paint. I can always add some more if necessary, but if it gets out of hand, you lose control. You don't want to just keep trying to blend it in. Just stop, wipe your brush off, and go back into it again. Now I got my brush wiped off, so I'm going to go back into some more Ivory Black. Emphasizing this shadow core. Now, another thing that a lot of beginners don't do, they'll leave something like this uh, just like it is, but they've forgotten the background. The background is very important in a painting. It brings the subject out more, depending on how you do the background. And one of the easiest things to do in the background is kind of alternate contrast. This is the dark side, so we're going to paint this part of the background a little lighter value than the front. So what we're going to try to do is we're going to use maybe a combination of these two values. Something like right in here. Now I'm not going to wipe my brush because I need to paint right now. I usually use a little bit of linseed oil, but this is a vertical panel and I don't want it to drain down, so I've got a loaded brush here and I'm going along this edge. Now, in this particular instance, I'm doing what's with the brush. I can actually, since I'm just doing the background, I don't have to paint in just one direction. If you'll notice, I'm doing what is called scumbling. Since the background is basically a flat value. This gets it on quicker and thins it out. And I'm getting closer as to the brush, as I want to try to get definitely around this form. I want to make sure there's no canvas showing through. Now, the tone that I'm going to put in the front is going to be a little darker than this tone. So I'm going to mix some of the shadow with the middle tone. Got a nice load on the brush. If normally, if this palette was laying down horizontal, I would mix just a little bit of linseed oil in. In fact, I may attempt to do that. Let's see, just a little bit, so it won't, hopefully, it doesn't run too much. Okay, that's just enough. This makes the paint flow much easier. Now I'll mix it in. Paint flows much easier when you do that. Now I'm going along this front side. This is the contrast I was speaking of. Now I can freely spread the paint out and blend. A little blending right here. Turning my brush over. Remember, the brush has a couple of sides and maybe paint on the other side. You want to turn it over. Sometimes you'll be surprised how much is on the other side. By the time I get over here to what other tone is, I've got a lot of my paint off the brush already. So it's not a lot of paint going in here, and it'll blend a lot easier. And just about finished here. I'm adding the final little touches on. This background is very important. You can do a lot of things with it to bring out the foreground, the subject in the foreground. Too many beginners forget about it, but it's very important. It sets up the atmosphere, the mood for the actual subject. And we can always smooth out our form while it's still wet. Now basically, there's your sphere using five values. Took these five, And you saw how I blended him in? And now using that on our next, if you can do a sphere, you can paint any type of form. That's how, and once it dries, I'll go back into it and put in the shadow core a lot more, and also I'll add that, get that highlight set up. Right now we want to let this dry, and when we revisit it, you'll see what I'm talking about. Okay, our next project is going to go from this here. What we're going to do is paint an anatomical form that should be relatively easy. Based on these principles, we're going to use the 5 values, and we're going to paint an arm. And I'll be showing you that next. But meanwhile, make sure you can try to paint that. Till then, keep trying to do that, and we'll go try next subject.